doing Surah Ya-Sin, and we had commenced with Surah Ya-Sin, and we were discussing some of the aspects of Surah Ya-Sin and the topics that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discusses in Surah Ya-Sin. And we mentioned that it's one of the most powerful surahs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about His oneness, His tawheed, His signs, His powers. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the concept of messengership, risalat, sending down of messengers for the guidance of mankind. And then the last part of Surah Yasin, the majority part of it, is with regards to resurrection and the day of Qiyamah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discusses various aspects of the day of Qiyamah. So we had completed until verse number 32, and continuing with verse number 33, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the great signs that are manifest of His creation, bearing testament to His oneness, bearing testament to the fact that there has to be a creator, and He's inviting us, and of course those that the Quran is revealed upon, to contemplate over these signs. And these are simple signs which you and I take for granted. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the earth and how it's dead and something comes out from the earth. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the night and the day and how there is an alternation between them, and how this is a sign showing you that there has to be some being that is pulling the strings, so to speak, behind this arrangement. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the sun and the moon. And for me, this is one of the very important parts of Surah Yasin, because it's very deep. 1400 years ago, when you look at the choice of words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses, particularly with regards to the sun and the moon, you will realize that some of this has only recently, through the study of the atmosphere and the galaxies and the different astronomy and astrology, this has only come to light in recent years. But the choice of words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses in the Quran points to the fact that there is a very deep meaning with regards to understanding some of these aspects. So this is a very important aspect of our deen, where we make tadabbur and tafakkur. We reflect upon the meanings of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also talks about the means of transportation and how He has created means of transportation. And He talks about ships, particularly because of the amazing nature of how ships are floating, whereas you would expect a mass, when it is put into water, it will automatically sink. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given man the intelligence and the ability to allow these ships to move. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions وَآيَةٌ لَهُمُ الْأَرْضُ الْمَيْتَةُ, and a sign for them. So you'll see here that وَآيَةٌ لَهُمُ الْأَرْضُ الْمَيْتَةُ وَآيَةٌ لَهُمُ اللَّيْلُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to signs. وَآيَةٌ لَهُمُ الْأَرْضُ الْمَيْتَةُ, and a sign for them is the dead land. أَحْيَيْنَاهَا وَأَخْرَجْنَا مِنْهَا حَبًّا فَمِنْهُ يَأْكُلُونَ. We gave it life. So we take a piece of land, there's nothing there, we gave it life, and we took out of it grain, different types of grain, wheat, corn, different types of grain. فَمِنْهُ يَأْكُلُونَ. So they eat from it. Now here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing towards, one is the fact that, look at this amazing arrangement. Man plants a seed, and he feels like he is the one that has generated the plant. But in reality, man's effort in this whole process is very minimal. All he does is he puts the seed in the ground. The act of actually allowing that seed to germinate, of allowing that seed to then grow, for roots to be taken, and for the tree to grow, and after the tree grows, for flowers to be born, and after flowers are born, you find fruit that is born, and that entire arrangement. This is nothing to do with man. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is highlighting here the greatness of His power. There's also another message here, that just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings the land to life after it has died, in the same way He is answering that objection to the kuffar and the mushrikeen, that after we pass away, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will also bring us to life. And if it is easy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create and bring to life millions and billions and trillions of seeds, what is it difficult for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring us back to life? So many different places in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the objection of the kuffar. إِذَا مِتْنَا وَكُنَّا تُرَابًا وَعِظَامًا أَإِنَّا لَمَبْعُوثُونَ. They ask this question that after we pass away and we become dust and we become bones, how are we going to be resurrected? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is directing their attention. They just look at this very simple act. And remember, these were people who understood agriculture. They understood the land. Sometimes you and I, we cannot relate to this because we live the city life. And we perhaps maybe haven't seen plants growing for a very long time. But these people understood that you put something in the ground and it germinates and it comes through, and all of this is coming through. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that on this land, وَجَعَلْنَا فِيهَا جَنَّاتٍ مِّن نَخِيلٍ وَأَعْنَابٍ وَفَجَّرْنَا فِيهَا مِنَ الْعُيُونِ. And we have placed gardens of date palms and grapes and caused springs to gush forth therefrom. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us His bounties. That on this land Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed gardens. And in these gardens there are different types of trees and fruit that grows. And then there is water that is gushing forth. Sometimes that water is on the land, and sometimes that water is coming from well beneath the land. And it's something that's easy for us to understand because of our water challenge, particularly here in our city. There's so much of water in our suburb that we find flowing 200 meters, 150 meters below the ground. There's so much of water. Where is this water coming from? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us in the Quran that this is from the side of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So looking at all of these bounties, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? لِيَأْكُلُوا مِنْ ثَمَرِهِ, so that they may eat from its fruit. وَمَا عَمِلَتْهُ أَيْدِيهِمْ. Now there's two translations for this, and both are amazing translations. لِيَأْكُلُوا مِنْ ثَمَرِهِ, that they may eat from its fruit. وَمَا عَمِلَتْهُ أَيْدِيهِمْ, and their hands did not make it. Going back to our earlier explanation, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is highlighting to us that your effort and your skill and your technology and your intelligence in this entire process of bringing the land to life, of giving gardens and date palms and grapes and all this water, you had a very small role to play in the whole thing. Your hands did not do very much in there. So that is one tafseer that is of this particular ayah. And the other tafseer, وَمَا عَمِلَتْهُ أَيْدِيهِمْ, and that which their hands produce. So that they may eat of the fruit of the land, of its fruit, and they may eat of that which their hands produce. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is highlighting how we take the fruit and how we take the plants and we extract things and we then make pickles and we make syrups and we make jams and so many other things of the manufacturing process that we create from the produce of the land. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this, these are two tafseers, two opinions. And then from this, what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying to us? Why is He enumerating all of this to us? أَفَلَا يَشْكُرُونَ. Are they not grateful? Are they not grateful for these bounties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has presented before them? Meaning that how do you truly be grateful? You recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You do not reject Him and say that there is no Allah. You do not reject Him and say that they are partners along with Allah. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to us, that يَأْكُلُوا مِنْ ثَمَرِهِ وَمَا عَمِلَتْهُ أَيْدِيهِمْ أَفَلَا يَشْكُرُونَ. إن سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون. Glory be to that being who has created all things in pairs. Everything in pairs. From what the earth grows, and from humans themselves, and from those things which they do not know. So we know that in the creation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created many things in pairs, male and female, not just in human beings or in animals, but you will find that even in the plant species, you will have a male and you will have a female. You will have an X chromosome and you will have a Y chromosome. You can go very deep. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is inviting us to reflect that from those things that the earth produces, there is things that have been created in pairs. From amongst yourselves, things have been created in pairs. And then, وَمِمَّا لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, and there's so many other things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created which we are unaware of. So many creations. It is mentioned in one hadith that there are more than 40,000 words. More than 40,000 words. When we spoke about the tafsir of Surah Fatiha, Rabbul Alameen, the Lord of the worlds, one hadith explains this that there are more than 40,000 words. So there's so much that we don't know. If we just take ocean life and we look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created there, we know very little about what is actually happening beneath the ocean. So there's so many things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created that we aren't aware of. Then He brings another sign, وَآيَةٌ لَهُمُ اللَّيْلِ, and for them, and a sign for them in the night. So we are invited every day, every night we see the night. But how often in our 40 years, or 50 years, or 60 years have we reflected that the night is a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And what is the beauty of the sign? نَسْلَخُ مِنْهُ النَّهَارِ. We strip it, we peel it away from the day. We peel it away, we peel the day away from it. نَسْلَخُ مِنْهُ النَّهَارِ. This word salkh means to skin an animal. When you skin an animal and you peel all of the skin away, then that is this word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using. So what is happening here, that the default state is darkness. But during the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has illuminated it, and as the night comes in, He's peeling away that light, and then you will see darkness sets. And if you watch and you see the time of sunset, you will see how that it's bright, and suddenly, like somebody is peeling a fruit, you will find that the light goes down, 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 down until it is total darkness. So نَسْلَخُ مِنْهُ النَّهَارَ فَإِذَا هُمْ مُظْلِمُونَ, that we strip the day from it, and then they are suddenly in darkness. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the day and the night. And in different parts of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يُكَوِّرُ اللَّيْلَ عَلَى النَّهَارِ. He wraps the day with the night, and He wraps the night with the day. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about how He enters the يُولِجُ اللَّيْلَ فِي النَّهَارِ وَيُولِجُ النَّهَارَ فِي اللَّيْلِ. He enters the day into the night, and He enters the night into the day. So this is a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings the sign of the sun. وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي لِمُسْتَقَرٍّ لَهَا. And the sun is quickly proceeding to its destination. وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي. So the sun is moving. Now, interestingly here, this is something that man has only recently found out, and perhaps many of you may not be aware of it, that the sun itself moves. It's not stationary. The sun is in orbit. Now remember I said in the beginning, go back 1400 years ago, there's no astronomy, there's no astrology, there's no hierophysics, which is actually the study of the sun. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the sun moving. And the sun is moving to its resting place. What does it mean that it's moving to its resting place? Two opinions are here. Number one, it is moving from a time perspective, it is moving towards the day of Qiyamah. And eventually it will come to rest on the day of Qiyamah, after which the sun will not rise again. So that is from a time perspective. And then it is also, Mufassirin explained, from a spatial perspective, that the sun is physically moving. There's a hadith that mentions that at the end of every day, the sun makes sajda in front of the arsh. Makes sajda in front of the arsh. And it seeks permission from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to begin the orbit of the next day. And one day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not provide that permission, and the sun will be told that go back from where you came, meaning that you will see that the sun will rise from the west, unlike every day where it's rising from the east. So this is from a spatial perspective, that the sun is actually physically moving, or the earth is moving, as we see, the earth is moving, and we see that the day and night is alternating. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ذَلِكَ التَّقْدِيرُ الْعَزِيزِ الْعَلِيمِ. That is the designing of the Almighty and the All-Knowing. So again, this is a design from the side of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now beautifully, not one day will you find that the day is at the wrong time, or the night starts at the wrong time. Everything is in absolute balance. وَالْقَمَرَ قَدَّرْنَاهُ مَنَازِلِ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, as for the moon, we have appointed measured phases or stations for it. حَتَّى عَادَ كَالْعُرْجُونِ الْقَدِيمِ. until it returns to its original state like an old branch of date palm. So when is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about the stations of the moon, that there are 28 stations of the moon. In every lunar month, you'll find from the new moon, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger till the 14th Laylatul Badr, it becomes a full moon. And then it begins to wane again right till the 28th day. And these are 28 stations of the moon. And then depending on whether the month has 29 or 30 days, the moon is not to be seen for at least 1 or 2 days. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, remember here, this is 1400 years ago. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the stations of the moon, and He's saying that at the end of the month, the moon's shape, that small thin crescent, is like a date palm that is old. It's very thin, it's withered, and it's bent over. So this is the description that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving. لَلشَّمْسُ يَنْبَغِي لَهَا أَن تُدْرِكَ الْقَمَرَ. The sun does not overtake the moon, وَلَلَّيْلُ سَابِقُ النَّهَارِ, nor can the night outpace the day. Like we mentioned, everything is in precision. Everything is following a fixed pattern. It's not like today you will find suddenly sunset became earlier than we expected, or sunrise was earlier than we expected, or we will find that the sun is going ahead of the moon, or the moon is going ahead of the sun. This is everything. وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. How beautiful! Everything is floating in an orbit. Everything is floating in an orbit. Now we know that the earth is in orbit. It's moving around the sun. We know the moon has got its own orbit. We know the sun has got its own orbit. If you just look at the study of the sun and the size of the sun, the temperature of the sun at its core, 15 million degrees Celsius. And the outer part of the sun, 5,500 degrees Celsius. That's the temperature of the sun. The sun is one of a many billion other stars. Some of them are bigger than it. The closest neighbor to the sun's own neighbor, a star that is similar, right, is approximately 9.5 trillion kilometers away. That's the neighbor of the sun. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is highlighting us or advising us to ponder that you, insan, believe that the world revolves around you. You think it's all about you. But just look at the sun, which is so much bigger than the earth. So many 100 earths, 330 earths it takes just to fill the mass of the sun. The sun is just one of a billion other of its kind. And its closest neighbor is 9.5 trillion kilometers away. So really, when you have to think about yourself, and when you are sitting at home, and when you feel it's all about you, you get upset at home with your wife or your children, and why is my thing not put together? Just ponder over this fact. What a small speck, really what a small speck we are. And remember, the sun is there from the beginning of the creation right till the end of the creation. You and I are only going to be here for 60 or 70 years. We're only going to be here for 60 or 70 years. So everything is in orbit. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that وَآيَةٌ لَهُمْ أَنَّا حَمَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ فِي الْفُلْكِ الْمَشْحُونِ. Another sign is that we boarded for them is that we boarded their children in a loaded ship. We boarded their children in a loaded ship, referring to Nuh alayhi salam and all of the creation that were put onto the ship of Nuh alayhi salam at the time of the flood. وَخَلَقْنَا لَهُمْ بِمِثْلِهِ مَا يَرْكَبُونَ. Beautiful, beautiful verse. And we created for them things that are similar to it on which they ride. وَخَلَقْنَا لَهُمْ بِمِثْلِهِ. And we created for them its like مَا يَرْكَبُونَ, on which they ride. Now, who can think about something that is similar to the ship, that floats like the ship, that is contemporary today, that fits in this verse? Aeroplane. Aeroplane. In fact, contemporary Mufassirin explain that today that's what we know. In the future, there will be other things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us the ability to create. In fact, when this verse was revealed, the early Mufassirin, they took camels to be the like of the ship, because they used to call the camels the ship of the desert. The way the camel would travel with its load on its back as if it was floating on the sand. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, وَخَلَقْنَا لَهُم مِّن مِثْلِهِ مَا يَرْكَبُونَ وَإِن نَّشَأْ نُغْرِقْهُمْ. And if we so will, we can drown them. فَلَا صَرِيخَ لَهُمْ, nobody will respond to their cry. وَلَا هُمْ يُنْقَذُونَ, and nor will they be rescued. Think about that ship in the middle of the ocean, and there's a storm, and it's about to sink. All radio communication is out. And even if radio communication is there, it can be the unsinkable ship. We all know about the unsinkable ship. And despite the fact that it was unsinkable, so many people passed away, so many people drowned. So we are invited here to reflect on this, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to understand what Alhamdulillah. So, doing Surah Yasin, and